Hello, my name is Claudius Betts, and today I will be interviewing my guest, Gregor Huebner. He is a professor of composition at the University for Music and Theater in Munich, Germany. He is also one of the most versatile musician artists, trained in classical violin, jazz piano, and as a composer. He specializes in various kinds of music, including musical heritage, the folk music of Eastern Europe, his studies of contemporary music, and Neue Musik in Vienna and Stuttgart. While studying and living in New York City, he also focused on jazz improvisation and developed a keen interest in all kinds of world music, particularly Latin American music styles. He is also an award winner for composition as he won the grand prize at the New York Philharmonic's New World Initiative Composition Challenge in 2016, and he was nominated in the Best Latin Jazz Album category. Today, I will be interviewing him about his experience as a performing artist, his very unique style of composition, and about what advice he has for future generations of musicians. How did you start learning music?
Okay. Well, my parents are both, they're both music teachers at the high school in the city where I grew up, and we all learned instruments very early. I started actually with piano, and then the violin came on a year later. My mother is an organ player, and my father is a violinist. So that's how it happened. And we always played string quartets and stuff in the family because my mother also played the viola. So we had a full string quartet because my brother played the cello.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Um, Regarding your music career, was there a specific moment where you decided you wanted to do this for your career?
Yeah, around 15, I decided to become a professional musician, I think. I was classical trained, and then I got in, saw some, or listened to some music of like Louis Armstrong, and Glenn Miller's Story was a movie I watched, and that made me, excited about improvisation.
Mhm.
And at that time also, I was like ready to go for music.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. So, um, a little later than that, actually, you co-founded Tango Five. Um,
Okay.
uh, which well, lasted for a while, and I was, wondering, um in regards to, interacting with the audience, how would you say this kind of affected your general like idea of interacting with the audience? And would you say that this kind of engagement is lost in classical music these days, or what is your general opinion
I
on
mean,
that?
first of all, Tango Five was like a group which was a mix of all different kind of music, from classical to jazz to like global music, world
Mhm.
music. And it was like mixed with kind of an acting thing, We did like it was a music comedy show, and but we did very highly trained all we were all highly trained musicians. And I think what we learned with this group, I mean, this group lasted 25 years. So what we learned with this group was act, acting in front of the audience and make
Mhm.
audience laugh about things, and yeah, I mean, it gave me freedom to stay in front of the audience and also present myself in a different way than you would learn it in the classical music, I think.
Mhm.
I mean, I still studied classical music at that time, and
And you also studied in conservatory while doing this, right?
right, exactly. I mean, the,
Yeah.
the group really formed actually before I started to study
Mhm.
in my hometown, and then we all studied. Got some changes in the group, but we ended up all in Stuttgart in Germany, study
Mhm.
classical music. And I was in Vienna before, so I was in training actually for classical. I was supposed to be a classical violinist, and but I had this group which made it fun, and of course I earned some money too as a student. It was really good actually. So but it actually made me stand in the audience, in front of the audience, in a different way than a classical music would. I
Mhm.
remember my last exam in Stuttgart for the bachelor's violin degree. I brought in, like, the last number was arrangement of Sarasate, gypsy themes, and I did an arrangement for Tango 5, so they all came in.
Oh,
And
nice.
we had a full house at the last, final exam. That was some kind of a rare thing. Yeah. So yeah, that was Tango 5 actually.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Mm. So seeing as how, you're trained in, well, you study classical violin, jazz piano, composition, you're also really good at improvisation. Um, normally people would see these things as different fields, but with you kind of make this work together. How would you say this, how would you say that they influenced each other in your career or kind of meshed together?
Now that I'm a teacher, I see that they all are connected. You
Mhm,
know, certain things you have to train as an improviser is like you have to have your technique on the spot. You cannot think about it. I mean, on the
mhm.
piano, there is no fingering, or on the violin. You cannot think about this if you improvise. When you play the classical music, you always have it in front of you. You see it before you play it. In the improvisation, it has to be a reflex somehow, the technique. And now that I'm teaching it, I think it would be great if I would have learned this as a classical violinist too.
Mhm.
So it's really connected, I think. And improvisation was always a part of the classical music too, until it got lost somehow.
Yes, yes.
And I remember my teacher at the same final exam. There was a point in the exam that I lost myself in the cadenza to the Mozart concerto, and I kept improvising, and I got back into it. So it was kind of, yeah, it was nice. And my teacher came afterwards to me and said, "Oh, this might be a minus, in your degree." And then he came back after the jury decided, and it said, "Wow, it became a plus." Because there was this old teacher in there. He was 90 years old. Otnopostov was his name, very, very famous teacher. And he said, that's a plus that he improvised. And this generation was still improvising the dances. So when he was young,
Wow.
he improvised the cadences. And that's why he liked it, I guess. And I mean, that triggered a lot of things after I studied violin.
Mhm.
And
Why
I
do you
think
think this, why would you say this like is lost these days or
I mean, it's not now, it starts to be trained again in the classical
Mhm.
field. I don't know how it's in Baltimore, but I'm teaching in Munich at the university, and slowly you see it coming back. People
Mhm.
have to take improvising lessons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm the one who trying to bridge the gap between classical music and jazz. So that's my position actually in Munich. So I'm fighting for it, and it got lost because let's say composers wanted to control each note. Like, it
Oh,
started with Schoenberg. I mean, Schoenberg did, if you know, when he did Verklärte Nacht, there were 40 rehearsals before the premiere. I don't know exactly the number, but a lot of rehearsals.
a lot,
And he
yeah.
wanted to control every note he wrote. And that
Mhm.
happened with a lot of composers. And then the teachers didn't see the reason why they should improvise cadences anymore. So, I mean, that was the beginning where it got lost. Now,
I
now
see.
it,
Yeah.
now it comes back. I see it big time because composers want people who can improvise now. That is a big change. More thing, if I talk about improvisation, I'm not talking about jazz improvisation. I'm talking
Yes.
about improvisation in general. If you take a Bartok piece, and Bartok was an improviser too, you have to learn the language to
Mhm.
improvise. That's the main thing. You have to learn the language you improvise in. If you play a cadenza of Mozart concerto, you have to know Mozart's music. You cannot play something totally different. It has to be connected to the piece. So that means you have to learn the language. Exactly like in bebop jazz, you have to learn the language to improvise in the language.
Well, okay. Seeing as how you're a very versatile musician, how would you best, or could you even describe your style of music that you tend to?
Aaron J. Kearney said once to me, "You then you somehow like Ives, Charles, Charles Ives, who matched different music together and made it work." That was a big compliment to me, and I think that's how it is.
Mhm.
I grew up with folk music from East Europe. My father's from the Czech Republic, and I had this folk music background, which is also improvised in. We improvised at home, and then I have all this classical uh, education and the jazz education, and I don't see any borders anymore for me. For me, it's important. Music is there's good and there's bad music. That's what I think. And
Mhm.
the fusion of all different styles is good for me. It's my
Okay.
thing. You know, I mean, I have different phases. For example, I had a long time I was interested in Cuban music, in Cuban rhythmic music, Afro-Cuban music, and it's in my style at this time when I did all these different compositions. Now I'm in a different phase. I'm looking for other things, but it's a fusion, of what I'm doing.
Hmm.
So music has to be exciting, and also music has to involve the public, I think. I think
Okay.
that's a big mistake by the contemporary, not, in the States, they say contemporary classical music. In Germany, it's Neue Musik.
Mhm.
And Neue Musik is like after Schönberg, all the serial composers till today,
Okay.
Lachenmann, and all these people. They did the mistake that they didn't involve the audience, I
Mhm.
think. It's my opinion. And for me, the audience gives a certain energy back, which I'm using in my concerts. And it's very important to me.
Actually, would you say right now there's a specific style of music, maybe that you haven't explored so much that you would like to get into more? Um,
Actually, that's good that you asked because I'm doing a sabbatical next year.
mhm.
And I want to
Okay.
go to different countries in Africa. I want to go to Senegal. I want to go to Cameroon. And I want to go to South Africa to study
Mhm.
rhythmic structures. I mean, they don't have so much harmonic structures, rhythmic, and maybe some melodic stuff, because it interests me really where the rhythm, for example, how it went to Cuba and what was the origin of that. And of course, there are also very interesting instruments. In Mali,
Mhm.
Senegal, West Africa is a very interesting cultural uh, scene. And I would love to study that for a while. I mean, there are many things I'm interested in. If you think about Indian ragas, that's also something I'm very interested in, but I have to focus at some point. So that's the next
Yeah.
thing I want to do, and bring it into orchestral settings. Bring this rhythmic stuff into uh, the classical settings. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Regarding more, well, regarding recent times, with the COVID pandemic, I was wondering, well, what kind of advice would you give to other musicians regarding handling similar events in the future? Or what would you say that the COVID pandemic has taught us as musicians that we should be wary for?
I mean, for me, it was a really hard time for everybody, and but I could kind of uh, channel my interest in certain things during
Mhm.
that time. I got the energy other people didn't, I know, but I found a way to learn more about myself, to get deeper into things, and I mean, it's also always a financial thing. If you have to survive, that's a different thing. I had the
Mhm.
chance because I have this professorship in Munich. I have, they paid me. So I had the chance to survive pretty good. But of course, I had to find a way to get deeper into things. If not, I would have sat at home, watched Netflix or something. And I did actually. I created a solo piano album during that time,
Mhm.
which is released on the classical label, which I never thought I ever do. You know,
Uh-huh.
it's called 14 Preludes. I wrote every 2 weeks, I wrote a new piece. I practiced piano again. And I did that, that's something I did. And of course, I wrote different music for other settings too. So I could concentrate on that, even though it was a hard time, or it brought me even there, this special time. But it's hard to say. I hope not. I don't hope something like that comes back, because
Mhm.
what it did was the audience is different now. It's like more careful. People don't go out so much more anymore. We have less people in the audience, and I hope they come out again. It's still in the air, and that's difficult
Mhm.
for musicians. And you have to educate the audience again somehow. That was when I studied in Vienna. I didn't know anybody. I was afraid of my teacher. I practiced 8 hours, 10 hours a day for 2 years.
Mhm.
And I think everybody when you play an instrument like that, you have to really focus for a long time on that,
Mhm.
or intensely, to make it your own. And with piano, it's
Yeah.
even more difficult than with the violin to make it your own.
Well,
So
I'm currently 19 years old. So I was wondering, do you have any advice for musicians my age?
I think if 19, you have everything in front of you.
Mhm.
If you start, when you study music, you have to be a sponge. You have to be a sponge, taking everything in you can in the university. You're not going to learn everything during that time. You learn
Mhm.
after, really. You make choices after you studied. You have to make your
Okay.
choices. You have to be open the whole time for new challenges. And I think that's the way to go.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I hope it helps.
it did very much. Thank you. That was very
Okay.
interesting. Yeah.
Okay.